So Shyla Sinclair, the protagonist of the story, she's a private detective. She's coming off of a case where she helped another eccentric, very wealthy man who was basically just, from the little bit we glean of it, probably just delusional, and she feels a little bit of guilt, but not that much, about taking his money to just satisfy his delusions about the supernatural. She meets with Saxton Braith, and lands on his radar because of that case. And then Saxton, in the opening chapter, demonstrates that this is not a delusion. He believes, and it turns out it's true, he cannot die. And he has no memory of why he cannot die. He basically has in a newspaper clipping from when he survived a an aerial accident, an aviation crash, and says, "This is as far back as I can remember. I need your help with finding out my past." Shyla doesn't have the same kind of memory gaps on her past, but Braith insinuates that he knows something in her history. She does have a past, and he insinuates that he knows something in her history that he could use against her if she were to say no. So, in addition to the enormous amount of money that she is being offered for this case, she primarily takes it because she's afraid of this powerful man wielding this information against her. And so then it becomes this convergence of their different paths and different histories, and revenge and unearthing, like you said, things about yourself, and having a portal into getting a reckoning of some sort with things that have gone by, and having that resurface in the present. Both of them encounter scenarios through the story. Eventually both of them encounter that happening, and for better or worse in either case. And along the way we encounter various other elements of the past and ghosts that I think hopefully will, like you said, superficially, I'm always looking to scare the reader, but then also there are elements of history and just some fun, hopefully, nuggets in concepts of character development and the world around you, and always just being curious about what has walked ahead of you in the places that you are walking in now. And how does that make you feel? I've always been one of those kids who would walk around a museum or an old place and think, it's pretty amazing that this is however old, this artifact that I'm looking at. And it's pretty amazing to think of how many people have looked at it before me, and now I'm here looking at it as well, and we're all connected through time, this thing that we can't have no control over, this force that we have no control over, and yet this is the thing that can bridge that force. There are a lot of different horror techniques. I've had the pleasure of talking to some of my colleagues about these things in different settings, and one of the things I like to ask people is, did you get to do anything with this book that you've been dying to do, like a classic exploration of horror that you've haven't had an opportunity to do because maybe your previous books were vampire stories, werewolf stories, zombie stories, what have you. You can't do the ghost story thing, and vice versa. And so with this, I got to utilize one of my favorite things in any kind of ghost story: disembodied voices, and just the concept of sound. I think always really works pretty effectively. And when I've talked to people about different things that potentially could scare somebody, there's a consistency in, I heard something and I don't know where that came from, and that startled me. So many different horror trappings, as effective as they all can be depending on the person, they tend to be a lot more subjective. Some people are very squeamish about blood and gore, and other people just kind of see it and it brushes right off of them. Some people are afraid of certain types of murder, certain types of violence, body horror, cosmic horror, the idea of like, oh, we're so small in the universe. And that's one of the things that has never really bothered me. I was kind of, I don't know if this is ego or what, in my mind, the idea that we're this small in the universe, and it's like, yeah, but I am here. That's pretty awesome, actually. Like, most of the universe is emptiness, and yet we're here. We should all be like amazed by the fact that we're just present, as opposed to thinking how insignificant we are. But I've never aspired to be significant to the universe or even to the world necessarily, much less anything beyond that. But being here in this time and place, in the vastness of it all, being present for it is pretty awesome. Anyway, The one thing though I've seen this a lot more consistent is the idea of I was home alone and I heard something in the other room and I didn't know what the hell that was at first. People that don't believe in ghosts, people that do believe in ghosts, people that are usually a little bit braver, etc. Depending on your experiences, all of that, that is one consistent thing. And I got to get back into that. I did that with the first book, Spite House. The second book's a vampire story, Devils Kill Devils, so not so much. This one, I got to do it, but not necessarily in somebody's house. I got to do it in other places, which is a different element of additionally unknown. I've had to travel a lot for this, the work that I do now and previous jobs that I've had, and being in a hotel and hearing a strange noise in the hallway or wherever is also a different level of like, what the hell is that? Do I need to get up and double check that my door is locked? Do I need to call downstairs and see if something's happening? That element of it, and then being able to manifest it as this is a spirit walking down the hallway or something like that, getting to use that, that was a lot of fun to incorporate those kind of things in the story. We meet a ghost named ShraMM, who is maybe the most despicable character I've written so far. Just the most out and out villainous thing that I've written so far. Just irredeemable, and yet even with that, he's he's a drummer in a band, in a jazz band in the past, and he's haunting the kind of basement of a already underground bar where his band used to play back in the day. So you have the historical element with that. And anytime I get to incorporate something, just that little bit of element of, it's that much scarier if part of you thinks, not that I would have got along with this guy despite everything that he's, all the horror that we find out about him, but you might not have been aware of it, and you might have been drawn to this individual because, oh, he plays in this band and he seems like he's fun and has drinks, and then meanwhile he's got these dark secrets, and realizing that this is the manifestation of this ghost. A lot of fun to write that character despite how horrible he is as a person. And then toward the end of the book, there's a segment where Shyla, in the course of this story, I kind of think of it as you open the door. She opens the door to the past in order to try to get answers. But you can't then, once you've opened the door, you can't necessarily control who comes through. And so when she goes to Galveston Island, this place with a lot of history, a lot of death, if you look up the history of Galveston and natural disaster and crime, etc., the ghosts that she meets there in a brief segment, that are walking through, that she's not really, she hasn't invited them, but they see the door is open and they want to be heard and they want to speak to somebody, and they're trying to tell her story. Coming up with those ghosts and trying to infuse in a short amount of time that story. It was almost like if you were, I think of ghosts, if they were real, right? I try to be fairly agnostic about this, but if you presume that a ghost is real, the way that we often read about or hear about them interacting with human beings, it's almost like there's an SOS message. I managed to land on the frequency with this other person for this brief period of time. What can I rush to get out to tell them about myself, or communicate what happened to me, or whatever it is that's going to give me peace? How do I get that out expediently? And yet I know that this channel is going to close potentially quickly, and there's so much I have to say about my life, and trying to capture that with these spirits who are all in a rush and competing to get through the door at the same time, probably knowing they're overwhelming this individual who doesn't want to speak to them in the first place. But I need to say, I was murdered in this way, or I died on the island during this storm and this is what happened. Nobody found my body. Can you relate this to my family? Nobody knows my fate. That idea to me, as heartbreaking as it is, it's also just to test my imagination with those stories. That was a lot of fun to introduce people to those ideas. These two, part of the fun with their dynamic, like you said, without giving too much away, part of it is based on not being certain how much the other person really knows about you. and having a sense that this person knows something about me, maybe that I don't even know about myself, really, or maybe that I've tried to hide about myself, but not being able to be certain about how much they know. And then that other person, in contrast, acknowledging that they know certain things, but not wanting to give up too much information about exactly what they know because they're trying to hold some aces up their sleeve in this power dynamic. And so you have that. You have this element of how much can I trust one or the other with my history in my life that I've shared to a certain degree with them and with others, but that I need to withhold for my own safety and my own sanity in some circumstances. And then with Braith, we start to get with, later in the book, again, not to spoil too much, but you start getting a little bit of an identity crisis to a certain extent. And how much of that is genuine, how much of that is possibly a feint, we find out throughout the course of the book. And then with Shyla and what we learn about her and what Braith eventually learns about her, how much of her history is a hindrance to the way that she behaves and how much of it actually empowers her, and the difficulty of maybe something that empowers you not necessarily being good for you. It's almost, this analogy just hit me, and I love a bad analogy, so I'm just going to throw it out there, but it's probably ridiculous. But thinking of it, it's a little bit like, if for anybody who's familiar with like American football, and there are guys that play on the line, the linemen, and for much of their lives, their professional career, overeating and being huge, physically, like, I'm 6'7", I'm 370 pounds or whatever, is like a huge part of like what empowers you. But you're also going to die at 50 if you maintain that. And so many of these guys now, you see them in like media afterward, and they're like 150 pounds down from their playing weight. And they talk about, I was listening to a guy talk about on a podcast recently, and he was like, yeah, this is all the stuff I used to eat when I was like 22 because I had to sustain weight. And it was like, this is insane. And it's like, this empowered you though. This gave you your career, and it made you physically massive and strong. But it's hard to move, which is part of the job. Hard to like literally move off your pedestal. And yet it will kill you if you hold on to it. And as an analogy for Shyla, like, that's kind of what her anger to a certain extent is. She has this righteous fury about her past. And it makes her very strong. And yet there's this sense that if she holds on to this too long at a certain point, this is also going to destroy her. Is she going to be able to let go of this in time? Is she going to realize that I need to let go of this before it destroys me? Or is she going to be reluctant, as some people are in those circumstances? They're reluctant to... I've built my life around being a certain kind of way. In that lineman example, I built my life around being the biggest dude in the room, bigger and stronger. I want to maintain that. That comes with consequences. I built my life around this. Anger fuels me and drives me and gives me an edge that helps me survive situations. It helps you survive, but for how long? Will that anger eventually come back to bite her? And that's something that Braith starts to identify within her, and is something that, again, plays into their dynamic together.